Hello everyone, today we're back with another hitbox analysis video, and it's going to be a fun one today, because we're looking at Shulk, a character I've been playing a lot lately, and that I've been very happy with the performance of. He's definitely a lot better than the other character I play, that being Richter, and just has an easier time doing like pretty much anything. However, between Smash 4 and Ultimate, Shulk was one of the characters that received a pretty substantial buff, not really being anything special back then. So how did this come about? And how does the hitbox stack up? Why don't we take a look? Shulk's jab is terrible, basically unusable. It has the shortest range of any jab one in the entire game, and the second worst jab is even notably better than his. The hitboxes are unassuming enough, however you have to keep in mind how Shulk just refuses to lean forwards here, meaning that the jab just covers a little bit in front of him, which is such a stark contrast to the amazing jab he had in Smash 4. Distance is actually astounding. Of course Shulk is way better in this game, and most jabs in this game did receive a significant nerf from Smash 4, but this is a bit excessive. As we'll see, they really don't want Shulk to have any fast grounded moves to compensate for his significantly buffed aerials. The rest of the hits are the usual jab story, but the final hit does have a sour spot, which is a bit weird, since you'll probably never get hit by it out of the first two hits, meaning they made it just for the cases when you throw out the entire jab and hit only the last hit, because it would be way too broken if the final hit could deal 5 damage instead of 4.2. I don't know, it's a little strange. Okay, forward tilt. This is an interesting one. This move is fairly straightforward at first, having 4 hitboxes where the tipper is a little bit weaker. On the second active frame, it might seem like the hitbox is in the Z-axis, and would not be able to cover in front of him. However, because of hitbox interpolation, this is not the case. Hitbox interpolation being the mechanic that ensures that hitboxes properly cover the area between the active frames. Now this move is actually really messed up, because let me show you a clip real quick. Now, what do you think about that? Seems a little bit weird, right? So we're going to do something I've never really had to do before, and take a look at the hitbox from above. As you can see, for some reason the hitboxes are totally displaced, leaving a pretty significant blind spot in front of Shulk. And seeing how this is the first frame of the move, he does not get any interpolation frames to cover up this blind spot either. While this is not usually a very common problem in gameplay, it does happen sometimes, being a pretty blatant example of an oversight in this game. The move is fine overall though. Shulk is kinda desperate for usable ground moves, and this one is okay at that. His down tilt is a fairly similar move, now instead being a swipe along the ground having 4 hitboxes, where once again the tipper is a bit weaker. It is a bit faster and harder to punish than the F-tilt counterpart, but also doesn't have any other application other than zoning out opponents, since it neither KOs or combos. But it is one of the few fairly reliable ground options he can throw out in neutral, and usually not face a punish for it, so it does serve its purpose well. For definitely one of the more out there tilt attacks, his up tilt is a swing into the air where the Monado covers a huge amount of distance. Initially it has 2 hitboxes in front of Shulk, which then becomes 4 hitboxes, the 2 outer ones are weaker while the closer ones are stronger. The move reaches really far into the air and covers a bunch of distance in the swing. Shulk even does a little jump to make it reach just a little bit higher. However, it does have a ton of startup and end lag, so you really have to be sure if you think it's gonna hit, as people can air dodge through it and even punish you afterwards if you time it wrong. Pretty decent move, but can't exactly be spammed. Shulk's dash dash is very similar to his F-tilt, covering a lot of the same range and having very similar frame data, even having the exact same active frames and very similar end lag. Unlike F-tilt, however, this one only has 2 hitboxes, that granted cover about the same distance. The closest hitbox is stronger, while the farther one is a bit weaker. Dash deck launches up, however, which makes it a lot better as a combo option, placing the opponent in a pretty bad spot, while at the same time not having as much in terms of KO power. Despite being so similar, they both serve a unique purpose, but I wouldn't have minded if they were a little bit more distinct. Shulk's grabs are very average, being of both modest frame data and range, though combined with the Monado Arts, you can get some pretty good pressure out of them with his improved movement. As for throws, they are fine putting opponents in tricky situations. It doesn't have any true combos out of them outside of very specific situations, however Buster mode can set up into some cool things. Now we're getting into the really good stuff. Neutral air needs no introduction. It's likely the one thing this character is the most known for, besides probably the Monado Arts, and yeah, for good reason. It's an amazing move, consisting of 3 hitboxes as it starts out all the way behind Shulk, and follows all the way around him, ending up behind him once again, covering a massive area in total. The 2 closer hitboxes are stronger, while the tipper is a little bit weaker, though not by too much. I think it's very worth mentioning that this move had a huge glow up in Ultimate compared to Smash 4. Like, back then the move actually did not even hit behind him, and ended way earlier than you would think given the animation, but in this game the move is quite absurd, having a huge amount of versatility, being great in neutral, having only a few frames of landing lag, and with shield stun only being about 2 or 3 frames negative on shield, when landed perfectly. If you can hit it, it can easily convert into another attack, and the overall range of the move is something your opponents always have to respect. It's good at a shield, it's good when you're pressured, and it's good in neutral. The move really does it all. Very strong to say the least. Speaking of quite absurd moves, forward air is much another one. Now being a sword swing in front of Shulk going down in the air, it's got the same 3 hitboxes where the tipper is slightly weaker. However, this usually doesn't matter that much. The move starts out above Shulk and reaches all the way until the sword is below him. Needless to say, just from the hitboxes you can see how great this move is. Offstage, it's a nightmare to deal with, since one well-timed swing can be game over for most characters. On stage, the move is also very useful, seeing how the range is hard to punish, and the angle it launches at is very good for stage control. Not too much to say about it either. It really is just another amazing aerial. Now back air is a little bit more of a weird move compared to the rest. Unlike nair and forward air, this one is more of a stab than a swing. Shulk throws out the Monado behind him, and with it he gets this hitbox. Initially the move has one hitbox closer to Shulk, which is stronger. This extends a bit on the next frame, until a weaker hitbox reaches out as the sword activates. This stays out for a few frames until it goes away. The move, in all fairness, has a lot of range. However, the weaker parts of the move really are a lot weaker. So while it can be nice as a hard to punish neutral option, you really need the stronger part if you actually want to take the stock most of the time. It's a good move, but definitely a lot more laggy than his other options, so don't use it too much. This is another move that was changed a lot from Smash 4. And this time it's definitely not for the better. Just look at this absolute monstrosity that they actually put into Smash 4. Never forget what they took from us. And also never forget what they gave us in return, I suppose. Now both Shulk's up and down air are very strange moves. They both use very similar looking multi-hits to their moves, which is really not a good thing. Sure, it's nice that they effectively end up having a lot more coverage in the form of active frames. However, the problem is that these hitboxes are not very consistent if you're moving. They are definitely better than they were in Smash 4. However, they are still far from perfect, and will from time to time fail to chain into the final hit, which is very unfortunate since they are pretty good moves outside of that. Up air starts out with these hitboxes, which stun the opponent in place. Then the move waits a surprisingly long time until the second hit comes out, giving the opponent plenty of time to hurtbox shift or SDI away. The second hit is huge, I'll give it that, and the closest sweet spot is very strong as well, being able to steal stock super early in Smash mode. Again, it's a shame that the move is so unreliable, but when it works, it's actually really good. Much like up air, down air is plagued by similar issues, though it is a bit less noticeable, since you're not going to be chasing as much with this move, and the second hit is a bit bigger. The move starts out with 2 hitboxes overlaid, slightly different angles for grounded and aerial opponents. The second hit has 3 hitboxes. The 2 closer ones are stronger, while the farthest sticking out is a bit weaker. The middle hitbox is also the spike, though the top sweet spot does not actually spike, which is a bit odd. But this doesn't matter too much most of the time, since they launch so far away anyways. It can also be a pretty decent neutral option to throw off the more predictable and reactable options Shulk has. However, if you mess up, you'll likely get punished for it, since it does have some landing lag, so don't do it too often. Now on to his specials. First up is up B, and it's actually a very good move. The first part of this move actually has a massive hitbox out in front of Shulk. These send you up and set up into the second part of the move. After these hitboxes, there are some weaker ones that also just stun you and launch you up, as Shulk ascends into the air. Second hit is also a giant launcher hit that sends the opponents away. The move is great at a shield, and also good for catching opponents jumping after being pressured by aerials. However, do be careful. If you miss this, you're gonna take a pretty hefty punish more than likely. Also, for some reason, the move does not connect properly in jump mode, since the move reaches quite a bit higher when it's active. It's not a huge deal, but just kinda weird, since it would only take a little tweaking to the knockback to make it work. But, oh well. Could be for balance reasons, I suppose, even though I doubt it would be too strong. Side B is backslash, which is a fairly situational move. The hitboxes are quite simple here. Shulk leaps forwards with the Monado, and while the sword is angled up, it has 2 hitboxes, after which the sword has these hitboxes until Shulk hits the ground. The aerial version of the move is pretty similar as well. As the move may imply, the move is stronger when you hit opponents when they're facing away, which despite being easier than ever when the opponent's no longer turning around after getting hit, is still pretty hard to do. It can be good against characters that rely a lot on their back airs in neutral, but the move is so laggy that if you miss it, you're gonna take a heavy punish, so use it with caution. Our next special is Monado Arts, probably one of the most famous special moves in the entire series. As you likely know, the move has no hitbox. However, that's not really much of a loss, since the move is super good. Basically, this move allows you to change the attributes of Shulk for a short time. Really just the biggest fear of any Ultimate Balance Patch team. There are 5 modes: Jump, Speed, Shield Buster, and Smash. When switching into these modes, you get 11 frames of intangibility, which is pretty nice and kinda random, but it can save me from a random hit every once in a while. The move also got a huge quality of life improvement for Smash 4. For those who don't know, in Smash 4 the only way to get to your arts was to cycle through them with B, and it was not fun, let me tell you. Anyways, onto the arts themselves. Jump naturally enough changes the way Shulk moves in the air, giving more jump height and speed, along with more fall speed and gravity. However, like any of the Monado Arts, it does come at a cost. In this case, taking 1.3 more damage. Jump mode is great when recovering off stage, being able to close the gap where Shulk would not usually be able to recover, as long as giving him more time to mix up the recovery. It's also really good when edgeguarding and chasing opponents in the air, being able to go way deeper and way higher than before. Speed is another very strong mode. This one makes Shulk move faster across the board, however at the cost of dealing 0.7 less damage and having a shorter jump height. However, the jump height can also be a good thing, since it allows some moves to kind of auto-end around the time you would want them, without having to time it. Good for getting stage control and landing stocks when you don't really care about dealing damage anymore. Shield is by far the least flexible mode, but arguably one of the most absurd ones. When you enter Shield, you take half damage and 0.6 times less knockback. However, you become way slower and deal way less damage yourself. Your shield is also twice as strong for what that is worth. The real kicker with this one, however, is that you can do this out of hit stun. This allows you to switch to shield mode in the middle of certain multi-hits and otherwise true combos, being basically the only character in the game that is able to do something like this. This is extremely valuable for obvious reasons, being able to survive otherwise certain death, and potentially reverse the situation, as well as getting out of strong early stock damaging combos. Just make sure you switch out of it afterwards. You really don't want to stay in shield mode for too long. And every time you get hit, the shield mode loses a bit of its lifetime, so it's good for this, but not that much else. Though granted, it's pretty crazy for just being 1/5 of a special move. Buster mode is probably the simplest out of all of them. It's high risk, high reward. You outright just deal 1.4 times more damage, and take 1.3 times more damage in return, with an accompanying reduction to knockback, which is pretty welcome since it allows for some really busted combos. Again, the extra damage you take is applied after knockback. It's a very strong mode to get back in the game, and a simple string of hits can deal massive damage. Just make sure you have shield mode ready, in case you get trapped in a combo yourself. Lastly, Smash mode. This one is also quite straightforward. It makes you deal 1.25 times more knockback, at the cost of your moves dealing half damage. However, you also take an almost equal 1.2 times more knockback, so you really gotta be careful with this one. Luckily, you have control of when you want to use it, so usually you'll be the one pressuring with it, and pressure you will. There's nothing quite as scary as a Shulk with Smash Art on the ledge waiting for you to pick an option. And offstage you can outright just steal some games if you land a good forward air. It's very strong, but when both players are at KO%, it's a super risky option. But some people like to feel their pulse rising, and if so, this is one of the best ways. After such an amazing move, it would only make sense that we talked about an absolutely awful one. This is Vision, and it's honestly hilarious how dysfunctional this move is. It just doesn't work, which is strange seeing how making counters is like the favorite activity of the Smash devs. The move was bad in Smash 4, but in this game it seems like it's even worse somehow, as even landing the move at point blank range will simply miss sometimes. Let's have a look at the hitboxes. The detection area of the move is fine, however, despite having two different versions of the counter, they both manage to be equally as useless. After a hit, Shulk will freeze time slightly and perform a counterattack. The hitbox is quite respectable itself. There's nothing really wrong with it, but the main issue is that Shulk moves very far when he hits the counter, and a lot of the time too far before the active frames actually come out, meaning he'll cross up the opponent. It doesn't help that the counterattack itself is very slow, and the opponents actually move pretty far even when slowed down before the hitbox comes out, meaning it will sometimes just make them move out of range. It's very, very silly, but like I mentioned, it actually does have two versions. If you hold forward, you get the faster and slightly stronger version of the counter. However, this one also has the same issues where Shulk moves too far after the counter connects, making it just as likely to miss when opponents are moving while being countered. All of this is kind of more funny than anything else, seeing how counters are pretty bad in Ultimate overall. However, Vision is actually one of the longest lasting counters in terms of active frames, and is also one of the strongest. And with Monado Arts, you can actually get some really cheesy KOs, but overall you're better off actually using your good moves, I think. Lastly, for his smash attacks, we have some fairly inconsistent, although more consistent than Vision, hitboxes. That being more needless to hit attacks. Up smash consists of Shulk sticking his sword into the ground and causing 4 hitboxes to appear. The hitboxes on the sides stay up for a few frames, while the middle ones linger all the way until the launcher comes out, which is a huge pillar launching the opponent into the air. There has been a few times where I have had the first part not launch into the second one, but this is usually very rare. You can actually catch both lateral and neutral get up if you space the move just right, which can make for an explosive punish if you're in smash mode. Oh boy, F smash is a weird one. It's another two-part attack, where Shulk first stabs the Monado forwards and then activates the swords to launch them away. The first hit has 3 hitboxes and stuns you in place, and a bigger hitbox afterwards that launches them away. However, the angles here on the first part actually make it so that a lot of characters are able to hurtbox shift away between the 2 hits, making it not hit. It's a similar issue to Lil Mac's F tilt in Smash 4 for all of you who remember that video way back then. It might not come as a surprise then when I tell you that this also happened all the time in Smash 4, seeing how the hitboxes are virtually unchanged. This is the case for all the angles as well, although depending on the character's hurtbox shifting animation, some angles can be better than others. Again, this is not quite as common as something like Vision missing, but extra lame in this case since you're missing out on a huge hit, and often a potential stock entirely, from just a blatant oversight. It sucks that things like this are still in the game, but considering how Shulk got so much better in this game, there's not too much room to complain. Oddly enough though, the angled versions of this move actually has slightly more active frames. then the standard forward hit, which is a little bit strange, but I'll take it. And lastly, we have down smash as our final move of the night, which at least is not a two-part attack. Instead, Shulk does this spin on the ground, having 4 hitboxes on the sides of him, the tipper being slightly weaker. The hitboxes appear on the sides of him as he spins around. This happens 3 more times, getting weaker each time, until finally ending in front again. The move is kinda silly. It's not very good overall. It's slow and not even really that strong. You can maybe cover a text chase with it, given the right positioning, but overall the move is just not that great, which is fine, because to be fair, he does have better options in situations like this anyways. However, that's gonna do it for Shulk. I have actually been playing Shulk a lot lately, to the point where I actually would consider him my main at this point, which allowed me to be a little bit more in detail with the smaller aspects of some hitboxes. Shulk is a very strong character in this game, and have some crazy good aerials and overall neutral. While there are still a lot of things that are kinda janky, and don't work too well on a basic level, his strengths far outweigh his weaknesses in this game. He's not an easy character to play, requiring a lot of specific spacing and movement, seeing how his moves are very slow. I think he's really fun to play though, and a very underrepresented character in the game. Give him a try one day if you haven't already. There's a lot of fun stuff here, but anyways, I think that's going to do it for now. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.